Welcome to So You Want to Be a Geek, the podcast where we dive into the vibrant and ever-evolving world of geek culture. Whether you're a seasoned fan or just curious about what makes being a geek so special, join us as we explore everything from comics to movies, gaming, tech, sports, and everything in between. Each episode will bring you insights, interviews, and the latest news to fuel your passion and expand your horizon. So grab your favorite fandom and let's embark on this geeky adventure together. I'm Michael Canetti, and this is So You Want to Be a Geek.
And I have with me today my forever co-host and compadre and everything, Pete Labrozzi, master 3D printer. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. How's it going?
Good, good. Tell us a little bit of your chicken or the egg story of how you got into doing 3D printing.
All right. Well, this about me, but for the listener, I was always intending to be a photographer. A long time ago in a past life, I was intending to be an engineer. So that's kind of always been part of me from the time I was a little kid working with my Legos. I just to figure out how things worked, how to put things together. And unfortunately, I'm a little slow on math, so I don't think I'm going to be able to keep up with the big guys with the engineering thing. So I kind of decided at the 12th hour to go a different direction. But this has really been a renaissance for me in a way of being able to do some of this tinkering and being able to play around with some of this stuff in a more meaningful way than I would have been able to otherwise. To your point, I think the big change that's happened in the past years with 3D printing has just become so much more accessible. First time I touched the 3D printer was with you.
Yeah.
Mike and I were working together at a university for a minute, and they had a 3D printing space where they had a couple in there. We were tinkering around and making little doodads, hair combs, stuff that was built into that or into Thingiverse. And I was, wow, this is really cool.
They show up at his house yesterday, and he printed off this magnificent Dark Knight bat signal that lights up and everything. And I'll take pictures of it, and I'll share it with the video portion of this podcast. But it was the detail alone, and I'll let you dive deeper into it, how it was able to suspend the bat signal in thin air is just crazy.
Yeah, so the way it built it is it built it upside down. So the bat symbol itself, at least, was stuck to the build plate when it started. But the problem then becomes, how do we keep that bat symbol floating in the middle? Now, you could just create a little panel through the middle and stick it to that, and that would be fine as well. But this is the type of print that I've been seeing pop up in the past couple of years, which is only, I think, to my knowledge, been possible in the past couple of years, with some of these printers being able to sort of make these magic little floating lines of filament without them drooping and creating a giant mess.
And the lines are, if you envision as thin as fishing line, that's what it is.
Yeah, so essentially they call these suspended prints, and it takes a little bit of special design to create them. And in this case, what it was using, a pretty simple print as far as materials went. A lot of black for Batman, but then the other filament that's used in it is basically a semi-see-through PLA. And PLA, I probably should have already mentioned, is probably the most common thermoplastic.
Yeah.
It's the one that most people are using.
Yeah.
There's a ton of other ones out there that have all sorts of different material purposes and reasons for using them. I'm not going to dive too deep down that rabbit hole, but suffice it to say, PLA is the basic standard that most people use for most printing. Right. So the see-through one, which again, they weren't even used to be making things like that, and the material science has come along so well with those that they're really cool.
Even we, back in the day, had a see-through or clear color, but it was really, when it was done, it was almost a yellowy. It wasn't translucent of any sort. It was just sort of a yellow or a muddy kind of whitish color.
Yeah, and depending on how cheap a material you buy these days, you can still run into that.
The other thing I was thinking about is just, we were talking about the Iron Man over there, right? But there's also this element of, hey, now I got to paint this thing. And all of this, to me, is art in some capacity, one way or another. But the artistry and the patience of painting that statue just takes so much patience. And there's 6 or 7 coats of paint on that thing at least.
Yeah, I mean, he was complicated. I will say I'm at the beginning stages of my painting career. I've printed a bunch of things, and I'm starting to find my way through that. The wonderful thing, you sort of mentioned this in the context of Thingiverse before, which I should say, Thingiverse was kind of the OG. It's still around, but now there's a million other wonderful sites that people are putting models up on, sometimes for free, sometimes paid. There's Patreons out there for people that just all they do is create these high detail models.
You'll see guys on YouTube and they'll go to the link in my bio and you can buy whatever template it is.
Exactly. So Iron Man here is part of a multi-piece set. I've got the other part over here who is not painted and he's missing set at the moment, but supposed to eventually have Iron Man and Tony Stark standing back to back on a giant arc reactor. But this is by a group called 3D Wicked, and they have their own Patreon, and I've subscribed to them for quite some time now. They make all wonderful Marvel related stuff.
Oh, wow.
And the stuff is super detailed. They really nail it. They get so many things right from the movies, from the comics. So it's a lot of fun, just as a little shout out for them to mess around with their stuff. But yeah, no, so to walk you through the putting Iron Man together A to Z, I did this all on the SLA printer. It was a number of different prints. I had to do the arms separately. I had to do the legs. Even the legs are in different pieces. They sort of have each thigh was done in one piece, and then the boot, if you will, was done in another. And then the middle section of his core, his helmet. They're all done in a different little section.
I saw somebody 3D print like prosthetics for people who have lost limbs and stuff like that.
Well, so like that, I'm so glad you mentioned that. So I right now these days work at NJIT, and we are an awesome technical school. And they have this unbelievable maker space, thousands and thousands of square feet full of every kind of tool you could imagine. And so they have large 3D printing labs that the students have constant access to and very often are required to create projects and work on there. And so it's really neat. I work as a photographer in my day job. When I go to these student fairs where they're out there showing the work that they've done, and they've printed a really cool modular hand for somebody who's lost an arm, or just different little quality of life things. There was one group that I was fascinated by where it goes back to almost old school sort of thinking with the old hook when you lost your hand, but they made all these different click-on-click attachments that had all sorts of different purposes that would help somebody during their daily work or whatever they were trying to do that are in that situation. And it's wonderful. And I've seen, and maybe I've even hopefully myself give back at some point of this too, but I've seen a number of people online, especially for little kids who have lost an arm or have a deformity or whatever that comes along, people printing them Iron Man repulsor arms or stuff that is going to help them in their day-to-day, make them feel whole in their day-to-day, but also is going to give them that little kick. Like, I love Iron Man. I want to have this repulsor arm sort of thing. So they're getting to a point now where they can essentially go out. It looks like a big crane, but it's a big 3D print arm, and they can print a whole house out of this material in 2 and 3 days. And there's been some stories of some of the earlier ones are not holding up so well. I said, it's new technology. We got to figure our way through it. But this is also what they're planning for things, the moon and Mars. If we go to colonize those locations, they're going to send a series of robots that can 3D print. They're going to 3D print HABs.
A space station of some sort.
Yeah, and they're already playing with that technology. They're already working with this at places NASA.
3D printing is something that any hobby, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to do this. You can just do a little Charizard here and have fun with it. But you could really... People are making it into businesses. They're doing it for science and so on and so forth. And it really could expand your horizon on things. And if you're interested in this, you should definitely check it out.
3D printing pens are so damn cool. Oh, really? It's essentially, I'm going to hold up a Sharpie here in demo, but it looks a pen and you put the same type of filament through it. Zoe has one and I give it to her. Zoe's my daughter and I'll give her filament from mine, or she has a bunch that came with hers. And you sit there and you start on a little rubber base and you start moving it around. You press a little button and it extrudes the filament as you're pressing the button. Stops when you take your finger off, and you can start building little fun creatures and things, or little whatever your mind can imagine. She'll draw her name and stick it up on the wall like into 3D, and it's cool. And people might use 3D pens to fill in gaps on some of these prints and things that we're doing. So those are incredibly accessible. You can get those for super cheap off Amazon on Micro Center off. You can get that. I've seen them at places Target.
Yeah.
And it's a great way to start playing around with this concept of, all right, I have to start at the bottom, I have to build, and it has to go up. Maybe it has to have something to stick to. You can't just, if you start doing it in thin air, you're going to have a droop of stuff falling down. So it's been a fun way to start teaching Zoe about the basics of how the prints work and everything too. So, I mean, that's accessible to anybody right now.
Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at SYWTBAG for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and more geeky goodness. Have a topic you'd like us to discuss or a guest you'd like to hear from? Let us know. So you want to be a geek at gmail.com and stay up to date and join the conversation. Until next time, keep embracing that inner geek and remember, the adventure never ends.